Of carnage in the Outer Rim. The people needed the Republic. Palpatine was to react with excitement, but Sidious was fuming, realizing that he needed to twist this against the Jedi. Good thing he had Dooku. He could prop up Dooku as a warmongering Jedi. However, that would likely become more difficult considering Dooku was so back and forth on his role. Sidious had begun looking for a replacement, but that was increasingly difficult. Qui-Gon, on the other hand, told Anakin about Shmi being freed, and how the Council was looking into efforts to get rid of the slaves in the Outer Rim, along with some other nasty practices. Anakin was excited about this, and as he was getting more and more eager about it, Palpatine blocked it. This left the Jedi in a tough bind, but the Council believed it was time to make a decision for themselves. This decision by Palpatine, that was also backed by a good number of members inside the Republic, would be taken up by the Jedi. Though without much political influence, they had to work diligently. There were senators in the Outer Rim who were eager to help out and provide credits and support the Mercy missions. Ryloth, Rhodia, Toydaria, and a number of other worlds. Outside of the Outer Rim, Mid-Rim worlds were also willing to contribute. This included Naboo and Duchess Satine's Mandalore Coalition, which wasn't a group against the Republic, rather a couple hundred planets and systems that didn't have representation within the Republic, but supported each other like their own miniature Republic, just without the bureaucracy. The Council had to put a collective hiatus on Anakin's training. It didn't mean he was left alone, it just meant that Yoda dispatched the Council. Plo went to Toydaria and its surrounding systems. Ki-Adi-Mundi and Even Keel went to Mandalore, and Windu went to Ryloth, just to name a few. With most of the Council not present, Anakin realized how closely connected to all of them he really was. Obviously, there were 5 or so that he was closest with, but with only Shaak-Ti and Yoda being present, he realized how much he loved the other 9 Council members. He really appreciated them for what they did for him. But thanks to Shaak-Ti and Yoda, he was able to continue his training. On the other hand, this was negative, because both Shaak-Ti and Yoda couldn't be with him all day, and he was given more free time as well, which is where Dooku was able to start painting a negative picture of the Council for him. It hurt his heart. Qui-Gon was Dooku's student, and all Dooku did was go against the Council and talk about it as if they were slavers themselves. They weren't perfect, but they were far from evil. This was especially true considering in the coming days to weeks, militias would be raised from non-Republic and Republic worlds that weren't in the core to go and help reclaim the Outer Rim. This did 2 major things. It painted the Jedi as liberators or warmongers, depending on whose side of the political row you were on. It also made Palpatine look especially weak. The Republic didn't help out the people in the Outer Rim, but people helped out the Outer Rim. It was a strange dilemma for Palpatine. The effectiveness of his plans literally relied on the Republic looking corrupt, but not in this way. The Republic looked weak, and with Palpatine leading the ineffectiveness campaign, people were more inclined to see him as weak rather than the system itself. However, with politicians aiding the Jedi's efforts, it became exponentially clear that once the Outer Rim was secured and given proper representation, things would need to change. What followed was an invasion of the Outer Rim. The Jedi were prepared with enough volunteers to defeat a system fleet. The people moved in together. For a lot of people in the Mid and Outer Rim, they saw this as their chance to liberate others and in turn liberate themselves from the Republic. Palpatine was clearly not going to fix these issues in their territories, so if they could bring people together, then maybe they could get the representation they needed. No one was thinking civil war against the Republic, but everyone was thinking better for themselves. The Jedi went in and were seen with their capes and their laser swords like heroes. For young Skywalker, he wanted nothing more than to be a part of this, and for both Yoda and Shaak-Ti, they saw this as Anakin's desire to be a Jedi at the highest level of their inner performance. As Council members rotated from the battlefront to Coruscant, they could see Anakin's growth. As he began shooting through growth spurt after growth spurt, his maturity continued to be a defining factor within him. Especially as a Grand Master and him cut a deal after Yoda heard Dooku talking smack about the Council, to Anakin. By this point, Anakin just looked at him like an annoying uncle who always spouted off conspiracy theories. He learned that instead of defending, he'd just laugh and smile and nod his head, because it made it all end faster. Dooku's lack of a backbone came from the pressure Palpatine put on him, but also his fear of losing Qui-Gon's respect. At the end of it all, he was failing not just both of them, but himself. Despite Qui-Gon's loyalty to the light and his aspirations to be with Anakin in the temple, he found himself as a frontline warrior. He and the Council were here to liberate. They were being knights of the Republic and they were winning. The war with the crime families went brilliantly, and after a full year of supplies and warriors, the crime syndicates crumbled. The slave trade vanished and many top-paid bounty hunters either died or vanished like ghosts. It was a total victory for the Outer Rim, which, with the help of some senators, Ta, Anaconda Farr, and Padme Amidala, they were able to usher in individual representation to the Republic. At the same time, the Mandalore Coalition was sending fresh aid to the Outer Rim. Of course, this did have its own risks, but with many of these hundreds of star systems believing they'll get a return on their investment, they piled in. The idea that was crafted by Satine was a bit of an alter to what she did for her people on Sundari. Of course, the only difference was the scale of how it had to be done. In a perfect galaxy, it would be done effortlessly, but that wasn't possible. Credits, labor, and supplies were expensive, so it had to be written up that every planet and a new legislation would put away a percentage of their income to return to the planets they received aid from within the next 2 decades. While there were some senators and leaders who worried about the effectiveness and the reality of such actions, the boys of Duchess Satine firmed their voices. The Jedi were also in heavy support of these actions, and then when the Council turned its attention to the Republic, it was clear the status quo had changed, though that change wouldn't be visible for another couple years, which is when Anakin was 17 years old. He had already passed his trials by this point, and he was on the daily sparring with the Council members. He was a remarkable Jedi, and everyone in the Order knew it. He inspired so many just with his individual growth. It was obviously something aided by talent, but his dedication was the difference. If he wasn't dedicated to his craft, he would still be powerful, but he wouldn't be remarkable. Anakin was truly a force to be reckoned with, not because of his lightsaber skill, but because of his mastery and understanding of the Force. Having spent so much time with the best of the Order, he was able to understand things that many never got to learn. At this point, the galaxy had completely been reshaped. Despite Dooku's plans to turn Skywalker, he wasn't getting anywhere, and truthfully, he didn't want to get anywhere with anything anymore. He was so focused on the idea of turning Anakin that as the Order shifted and changed around him, he realized he had only become what the Order he despised was, while the Order reshaped itself into what he wished it was. He was so disappointed, and Qui-Gon even decided to stop talking to him. Dooku had no one. While Yoda was always ready to support him, they hadn't spoken in a number of months due to Dooku's inability to listen to anyone. The Jedi, having won their war in the Outer Rim, deployed units of Jedi warriors and peacekeepers. They weren't received the best when they first arrived, but when they brought fresh supplies and credits, they were no longer seen as oppressors but liberators. Of course, there were scum that thrived off the crime syndicates when they had power, but once the people turned on them, they realized they couldn't legitimately sustain a conflict with the freedom fighters, that either changed their ways or vanished. The Republic itself, with the help of numerous senators, increased the size of the delegation to 2,000. It became a party that was fully lopsided, and with the power, it removed Palpatine from office in one swift blow. The vote of no confidence came from his senator too, Padme Amidala. While Anakin hadn't been fully introduced to the world of politics, he was simply aware of it because of how much time he spent around the Council, and while he actively wasn't pursuing Padme in his dreams, he found himself a good friend inside the Order, one that was a year older than him. Marjorie Kellum was still a Padawan, but that wasn't an insult to her. She just trained at a normal rate for a Jedi, unlike Skywalker. One day, Anakin was inside the archive studying with Marjorie and talking to Jocasta Nu when Dooku came up to him. Anakin hadn't ever been around Marjorie when Dooku had done this, and truthfully, he was kind of fed up with the adolescent behavior from the older man. He let Dooku get a couple sentences into something he seemed so dissatisfied with saying before Anakin got up and grabbed him by the shoulder and turned him around, walking forward with him. Anakin looked at Dooku and asked him what his issue was. He was always doing this, always trying to convince him to believe something he didn't believe. There were flaws, sure, nothing is ever perfect, but he acted so high and mighty. It was time to stop, or grow up, or get a spine. Anakin just said that for being such a generational talent, he sure did a lot of whining. Maybe he'd be better off becoming a member of the Lost 20, or just leaving. Anakin remarked that Dooku didn't even seem interested in what he was saying half the time. He told Dooku to leave him alone and stop harassing him. The Elder Jedi Master just looked at Anakin, as his brows firmed and he turned away and headed back to his table. Dooku wasn't really ever fond of Anakin anyways, and with Sidious always yelling into his ear, he had even more reason to dislike him, but it seemed as if the wisdom of the Council had found itself home inside of Anakin's mind, because that statement felt like it came from Yoda or Qui-Gon themselves. It was so forceful but delicate at the same time. But at the end, it made Dooku realize that he became the very thing he swore to destroy. He was a hypocrite. He was actively avoiding the positive change the Jedi were enacting. And while the Jedi weren't perfect, he wouldn't be able to do better himself. The Jedi rallied up an army and destroyed every established crime family in the span of a year. They continued to go out into the Outer Rim to help the people. What was he doing this entire time? Nothing but whining at every possible turn. The shame Dooku felt washed through his skin and bones. With Palpatine out of his seat in the Senate, he was nothing but vulnerable. So Dooku messaged his master and told him that he secured Skywalker. Sidious was eager to get these results. If the Sith couldn't use a war, then perhaps they could steal a chosen one. The war was still in the plans, despite Dooku being a Jedi the entire time. He was still posing as Lord Tyrannus. Dooku went back to Anakin and told him that he would like to show him something after apologizing. Anakin asked what it was, and he told him it would require a journey. Anakin looked at him and then to Marjool, who told him to go ahead. She would probably still be here by the time he returned. He smiled and got up and followed Dooku, asking where they were going. Dooku didn't really say much, but Anakin didn't exactly have no reason to not be super distrustful of Dooku. He didn't trust him, but what Dooku was really about to do was something he could never really prepare for, or expect. They got into a ship and sped across the city of Coruscant. It was at this point Anakin started to get a little wigged out, so he tapped his communication device and transmitted a live signal to the council chambers. The Jedi were in discussion when it popped up. It was especially weird for Skywalker to be doing this on Coruscant, so they immediately assumed he was in danger. So Windu, Shaak Ti, and even Peel jumped up and the other Jedi were to stay back. It shouldn't be that big of a deal. Emphasis on shouldn't. Inside the Jedi Starcraft, Anakin got a little bit of a chill. He felt cold, unlike anything he'd ever felt before. There is something evil out here. He turned to Dooku, who was still silent. They landed inside of one of the buildings and Dooku spoke up, telling Anakin to exit. He looked at Dooku and then climbed out of the ship. He heard the words, "Welcome, young Skywalker," and he froze. Anakin turned back and grabbed his lightsaber with a grip. Sidious presumed that Anakin was eager to join the dark side, and without missing a beat, his lightsaber ignited. Anakin turned to Dooku with despise in his eyes. He couldn't believe it, but now it made sense. Anakin stepped back. He knew he was powerful, but without an overbearing ego, he felt cornered. He didn't know how talented the Sith Lord could be, but he knew that the one on Naboo almost killed Qui-Gon, and Dooku was a terrific duelist. Sidious was only 17. He knew he was meant to bring balance to the Force, but not yet. He wasn't ready. His hands tightened around his blade as he demanded to know who they were. Sidious turned to Dooku and asked how Skywalker was so oblivious. Dooku told Sidious that the boy was eager to leave the Jedi Order. Anakin almost spoke out, but he could see fury rising from within the hooded figure. Dooku told Sidious that they could turn him together. Without missing a beat, a lightsaber slipped from Sidious's robes and he slashed upwards in a dedicated hiss. Dooku slammed into his ship and slid down with a gaping wound in his chest. Sidious turned back towards Skywalker and told him that with Dooku out of the way, he could become the most powerful Sith the galaxy had ever seen. Anakin shook his head, raising his lightsaber to defend himself. Sidious was going to play nice. He knew he could gaslight Anakin into becoming one of them. He just needed to play this right. Anakin looked around with his eyes trying to see the right way to play this. Sidious stepped forward, his lightsaber deigniting in his hand. Anakin held his blade forward and told the Sith to not move any further. Sidious told Skywalker that Dooku had been informing him of how interested Skywalker had become over the years in the dark side. His hatred for the Jedi would make him powerful. Anakin was so confused. Then he looked at Dooku, who was holding his breath and looking over at Anakin. He lifted his blade with all the strength and pointed. Anakin turned back towards Sidious and demanded to know what he wanted from him. Dooku, with all the strength, tossed his blade up and contracts with businesses within the Republic. After 1,000 years of growth, the contracts ended, and the people of the Copernican system moved in and replaced all the facets of industry. The Tabana gas refineries on Neptune, Uranus, Saturn, and Jupiter would be replaced with higher functioning refineries. On the other hand, the